Welcome to this extra show of An Echo of Glory. Joining us today is Premier League commentator Gary Taphouse. Gary, thanks for joining us again.
Hey guys, how we doing?
We're good, thank you. So I wanted to tap into the life of a commentator, see what it's like on match day and just how you prepare for games, but I want to take it all the way back. Can you let us know how you got into it, where it all started for you?
Well, it's funny because my two teenage boys are at an age now where I was when I decided I wanted to be a commentator. My eldest is 16, my youngest is 14. And by that age, I was like, this is absolutely what I want to do. And it all started for me by watching the World Cup in Italia 90. I watched every single game, even if it meant, watching it at school or bunking off. And
Nice.
And I remember saying to my dad, these guys commentating, Barry Davis, Motti, Brian Moore, is this their job? Do they do this for a living, or is this like some sideline? And he said, no, I'm sure this is what they do full time. And I just couldn't believe that was someone's job. I just thought this is incredible. So I made it my mission to be a commentator. Now, obviously, we can all have dreams, but you need a lot of luck along the way. And you need to grasp those opportunities. And for me, I was at uni actually in Bournemouth, and I was living in a house with four others. And one of the girls I was living with was going out with a cameraman from a local production company, a much older guy. And I happened to overhear him talking on his mobile phone. This was mid-90s, and no one had a mobile phone, but he did. And I overheard him saying that they'd got the contract to film Bournemouth's home matches. This is when they were third tier with no money. And the commentator they were using was a vice president of the club, and he wasn't very good. He was very biased. He was slating the referees, blah, blah, blah. And they wanted someone a bit more professional. So I just went straight in and said, I couldn't help overhearing your conversation. This is something I've always wanted to do. So is there any chance? And he said, well, why don't you come to the next game, which was against Bristol Rovers. This is a 96-97 season. And we'll see how it goes. And it was literally one camera on this rickety old gantry at Dean Court, and me on a normal microphone plugged into the side of the camera. I mean, real tin pot stuff. But I gave it a go, and they used to sell the VHS copies of those games in the club shop with my commentary on. And then I did the whole of the rest of that season, and they asked me to write and present the end of season VHS video, which went on sale in HMV in Bournemouth, which I just couldn't believe. Yeah. So in the loft, I've actually got a collection of like VHS tapes with those games on. And that meant that I left uni, not just with my degree, but with, physical proof that I could do the job. I couldn't watch them now because it would probably sound absolutely dreadful, but it was a step on the road. And funnily enough, when I then got my first job in media, I thought I'd just walk into a job in sport. I didn't. I had to get a job on a local newspaper in South London, working in news. And one of the first jobs I went to, we got a fax through from Crystal Palace saying, we're launching a match day radio station. Can you send a reporter along to the launch in one of the executive boxes and report on it? So I went along. And I listened to the commentary during the game. It was against Blackburn. They'd just been promoted. This was 97, 98.
I remember that.
And I just thought, yeah, this isn't very good. I could definitely do better than this. So I went to the head of the station and said, look, I've just done this for Bournemouth. It's not radio, but I'll give it a go. And he said, come along to the next game against Chelsea, which I did. And that's how it started. And of course, having done no radio at all, I'd written a little script. They cued to me really early when the players were still in the tunnel, and I just ran out of things to say. I read my script, and then there's just silence, and they're on the talkback saying, Gary, it's radio, you've got to keep talking. So yeah, I learned that very quickly. And I used to sit next to the reporter from Capital Gold, which of course, Jonathan Pearce and all of his guys winning Tony Awards. And I was desperate to be a part of that because I was a voracious listener to Capital Gold every night. And of course, I got talking to them, and eventually they gave me a chance to report on an FA Cup game. In the first round, it was Fulham against Northampton, I think. And that's how it started, and one thing led to another. So, yeah, obviously a lot of luck there, but you've got to grasp those opportunities when they come your way. And yeah, that's how it began for me.
I mean, I'd also say you have to have a good voice as well, which obviously you tick that box. I just wondered how you, without giving away trade secrets, because I know commentators are very can be very guarded about how they. But just in a general way, how do you prep you personally without kind of giving away too many secrets? But how has it changed over the years? You just mentioned that you felt under prepped maybe for that first game. How has it maybe changed? Have you refined it over the years?
Well, two things. One, the internet, because 1997, you didn't get much help there.
Rothmans.
And of course, secondly, working for Sky Sports, we have fantastic people. We've got a dozen full-time stats people who work tirelessly to help us out. And we get stat packs before every game, which is a huge help. It does half the work for you. But it's worth remembering that those packs go to everyone on the OB. They go to the presenter, the reporter, the pundit. So you can't just rely on them because you're getting the same information as everyone else. So a lot of it involves talking to the people involved, trying to get a steer on how things are looking in the camp. I'll talk to local media from those teams. Particularly on a match day, I'll get there really early and spend a lot of time talking to the people that cover those teams on a regular basis, just to get a feel for it, really. I'm not someone who spends ages with stats. It's not my thing. And that's because as a viewer, a great stat is brilliant, but when you're just bombarded nonstop, I find it incredibly irritating and overwhelming. So over the years, I've kind of learned to say less, talk less, and use fewer numbers. So yeah, for me, it's about the inside stories and adding to the pictures rather than just talking for the sake of it. And I think a lot of younger commentators, it takes them a long time to learn that. It certainly took me a very long time to learn that. My attitude was I was being paid to talk, so I need to talk. And actually, I read Barry Davis's book, and he said in there, silence is golden, and actually not talking can be just as important as saying the right thing at the right time. So it can take a long time to understand that and learn it. And I like to think that I talk a lot less than I used to, and that's just as important.
So you said your first game was way back in sort of 96, 97. How many are you up to now? Do you keep a count?
You know what? I honestly don't know, but I mean, I do about 120 a season.
Right.
Wow.
So I must be getting close to 2,000. I mean, that's TV and radio, because I spent many years in radio, which I loved. I really enjoyed working in radio. But obviously, TV pays more.
And is there a difference, Gary, for the layman who wouldn't know, commentating on radio, TV, very different? Obviously, people can see the TV, they can't see the radio. How different is that?
Yeah, well, you're doing a totally different job. For radio, you are telling people what they can't see, which is everything. So where's the ball? Who's got the ball? And actually, I found that you do a lot less prep for radio because you don't really have the time to go through the in-depth stuff. Whereas, of course, for TV, everyone can see who's on the ball and what's happening. So you're trying to add to those pictures. And that's where those really key stats come in, where you might only have 2 or 3 a game, but they really do help to tell the story. And obviously that's where the COCOM comes in with the background and analysing the tactics, which you might miss. And sometimes it's really interesting when you're a commentator and you're so engrossed in the action, you don't notice when perhaps 2 people have switched sides or the shape might have changed slightly, and that's the COCOM's job. So yeah, radio and TV, very, very different. And actually, not so long ago, I was doing both. And it's not easy to flip between the two. I haven't done any radio now since 2019. And it was a very memorable game. It was when Newport beat Leicester in the FA Cup. Oh, yeah. And we were actually seated basically amongst the fans. So the prep I had done, I couldn't even use it because I was sitting like this. And it all just stayed on the floor. And it's amazing how you can do a whole 90-minute commentary with basically nothing but a team sheet, just drawing on your experience. So yeah, they're obviously big differences.
You've obviously been doing it for well over 20 years, Gary, but do you still get nervous? And do you get nervous for bigger games or bigger derbies when there's potentially more people watching?
No, I don't get nervous at all. Actually, I did at the start. I mean, physically sick, but no, not anymore. But you do still feel excited. When you're doing a live game, so I do a lot of live EFL and WSL, and when you know that they're going to cue to you quite soon, the teams are in the tunnel, and you do still get that huge rush of adrenaline. Because you don't want to make some massive cock up which is going to go viral.
Yeah,
it's the fear.
And how hard is it
if
if on air you've made a bit of a cock up and you're aware of it and you've still got an hour left in the game? How's dealing with that?
He's not done
Has
it.
that ever happened
I wouldn't
to you?
know, Jake, to be honest. Yeah, no. Listen, I've made a few over the years, and the best way to handle it, in my opinion, is to make a joke out of it.
Yeah.
I did a game during lockdown at Peterborough, no fans in the stadium, and we had a close up of Darren Ferguson, and I said Duncan Ferguson. I don't know why, don't know where that came from, and all I could, and I realised about 10 seconds later, no one corrected me, and I just made a joke of it, saying, I really hope Duncan Ferguson doesn't hear it and confronts me. I think the worst thing you can do is to ignore it and pretend it didn't happen, because you will get pulled up, and I would expect to get pulled up on social media for that. But I think if you acknowledge it, apologise, and make a joke out of it, that's the best way to handle it. Because listen, where else in broadcasting do you do 90 minutes of unscripted talk 100 times a season? It's you're going to make mistakes. Everyone makes clangers, and I think you've just got to remember it's entertainment. It's not life and death.
Let's ask you about
Make
those COVID games. Was there a sense that, or did you know the players could hear you? Obviously, a goal goes in, you're going loud. There's no one in the stadium. Were your voices reverberating around the stadium, or how was that?
Yeah, absolutely. And also the managers, more importantly. I did a game at Gillingham where we were literally right behind the dugouts, and I was acutely aware that the managers and the coaches could hear everything we were saying. And I think, I can't remember, was it Lincoln? They were 2 or 3-0 up, and their manager turned around and glared at us because, we were saying this is not what the fans will want to see. And I'm like, this is awful. This is really uncomfortable, but I'm not going to change what I would have said just because he's listening. And there was an incident as well in the Carabao Cup at Bournemouth, where it went to a penalty shootout, and one of the radio commentators for TalkSport was saying, and here comes TalkSport's Andros Townsend up to take and Andros Townsend was listening to every word, and he said it just really increased the pressure because I could actually hear my own penalty being commentated on. But I must admit, I didn't think about players hearing. That whole period is just something I'd rather forget, to be honest. And it upsets me when I see clubs tweeting goals from that period, however good those goals were. I just don't want to be reminded of watching football in empty stadiums. To me, it was just so depressing.
Agreed.
And as happy as I was to be working, and as privileged as we were to be in those stadiums doing those games, to me, it just wasn't real. It wasn't football. And thank God it didn't last more than the year it did.
Yeah, similarly, I was lucky to be working on those games for the Premier League, but I barely remember it. It just seems to have been a moment in time that has just vanished.
Well, most of the games were terrible, weren't they? Let's be honest. Not many of them were any good. I can't remember any that I did that were memorable.
Yeah. Well, talking of memories then, nice segue. Just through your potential 2000, those 2000 or so games, some quick fire questions. Best game you've worked on, the most memorable?
Yeah, I mean, it's impossible to pick one, but if I had to, just off the top of my head, there was when I was working in radio, I did Chelsea against Barcelona in Mourinho's first spell when Ronaldinho scored that incredible goal at Stamford Bridge. And it was 4-2 after a comparatively cagey first leg. I'd been in the new camp commentating on that as well, and that game just took everyone by surprise. It was just unbelievable. It's certainly one of the best atmospheres I've experienced there. And you know what? I'd also have to pick Tottenham 9, Wigan 1, because and the reason being, I'm sure you will remember the game, even though it was 2009, but it was only 1-0 at half time. And no one could have seen that coming. And I was commentating with Dean Sturridge, and I said to him at half time, I can see this being, 2 or 3-0 easily because, Tottenham are on top, but they only scored once. And he said, I've just got a feeling they're just going to completely collapse here. When I look at that back four, I can just see it all going horribly wrong. And of course, they had Eric Edman at left back.
I was going to say, friend of the show, we had him on. We had him on, and we talked about that, and that was a low moment in his career. I actually mentioned on our pod recently, Gary, when we spoke to you, that the Spurs Palace game, my now wife had dumped me that morning, and we went to lose to Palace. That 9-1 against Wigan, we had got engaged on the Friday, and I was a season ticket holder, and I said to her, do you know what? I won't go to Spurs on Sunday, and we'll do the whole family thing, and you can go and show everyone the nice engagement ring. We'll do all of that stuff. She left the house about 12 o'clock to go and see her friend, and didn't return until close to full time. So I didn't go to that game. And it wasn't on the telly, and it was in those days where it was very hard to find a stream. So I wasn't there. So that's my memory of that game.
All of your romantic memories have a Tottenham edge to them as well.
Well, we talked about this on the pod recently, that we had a guy who'd written a book on Spurs in the 90s who's got this incredible memory. And we were saying that all these events in my life, are linked to Spurs. Not necessarily romantically, but so other memories.
But, there's still so many records from that game. 8 goals in one half.
Yeah, Defoe's 5.
Jermaine Defoe, 5 goals in one half.
Yeah.
It's just absolutely incredible.
Yeah. And their goal should have been disallowed.
I've got a lot of memories from post-match of there as well. We had to beg Jermaine to do the post-match interview. He didn't want to do it. He wanted to go and see his mum in his box.
Oh, yeah.
And I said, well, look, could you come back after that? And I said, also, we've got to interview Aaron Lennon because he was man of the match. It wasn't Defoe. He was incredible. Yeah. But he sneaked out the fire exit in the dressing room. He refused to do it.
Wow.
So we never got to interview the man of the match after that game. That's one that's always going to stick with me. And I've just got to say one more as well. Very early on in my Sky career, because I'd often get sent to what was on paper the worst game of the weekend, because I was the newbie. They sent me to Portsmouth Reading in 2007, and of course it ended up being 7-4.
Oh wow! Yeah.
And it's still the most goals in a Premier League game ever, even all these years later. Wow. That was just insane, absolutely insane. And I had to interview about 7 or 8 players after. Normally we might do 1 or 2, but they just said, look, you've just got to interview as many players as you can, because they're not going to play in a game like that ever again, probably. So that's another one I'd add to the list.
Which co-commentator do you look forward to working with when you're, you're going
to say all of them.
All of them.
Well,
there must be a couple that you go, that'd be. I
thought you were going to ask him which one he doesn't.
No, I wouldn't do that. That would be a good day. That would be a good. I feel in safe hands with him alongside me.
I feel that about the vast majority. I've got to be honest, because if they've got to the stage where they are co-coms on Sky Sports, they're going to be people who know what they're talking about and know what they're doing. You'd be amazed at how much work some of these guys do. I do games with Andy Hinchcliffe and Don Goodman, and they turn up with more handwritten notes than I do. The amount of work they do for every game is absolutely incredible, and they'll always talk to everyone involved. It's fantastic working with them. I've done about 250 games with Tony Gale.
I love Tony Gale.
And honestly, as a broadcaster, for me, unparalleled, and he's just got so many incredible stories, which none of which I can share here because they're entirely appropriate. He always says, "I'm here to analyze a game of football. I don't need to know how much possession they had in their last game or how long it is since so and so scored. I want to analyze the game of football in front of me." And he reads the game as well as anyone. So it's always a pleasure to work with him. But as I said, listen, I've actually worked with quite a few new commentators over the last year. Sky have said to me, if we've got a new person, would you mind talking them through what's involved and doing their first game? And that's that's been absolutely fantastic. And it's not their first game ever. They've worked for other mediums or on radio, but it'll be their first Sky game. And I've really, really enjoyed that. And, you know, they say, can you give me some feedback? And I've really enjoyed sort of guiding them through the process. So I've kind of avoided answering your question directly. But,
no, you did enough.
I generally, I don't think there's anyone where I go, oh my God, I'm working with him. So that's the good thing.
I'll take it as read. Best stadium is the new Tottenham Stadium. Best food, worst food. And well, what we're actually really interested in, Gary, is the worst gantry. Normally, there's an FA Cup story. You mentioned Rodney Parade there. What the worst gantry you've been on? Had to climb up a ladder.
That's easy. And it's probably, you probably guess it. It's West Ham, because you're about 3 miles from the pitch. You know, as much as I love that stadium in a non-footballing capacity, it's not a football stadium. And I tweeted a picture of our commentary position when I was there for the Bournemouth game. And honestly, you end up commentating off the screen a lot of the time. You are so far from the pitch. And I was someone that absolutely loved working at Upton Park. What a stadium. What an atmosphere. What a gantry. I mean, I was devastated when they left that place for something completely different. Listen, I like the match day at West Ham. I just don't like the actual commentary position. It's so far back. And if there's a goalmouth scramble or something, you really are just like, what is going on here? I haven't got a clue. Luckily, with my contacts in, I've got 20/20 vision. But if you are struggling in that department, then West Ham is not the place for you.
Gary, just taking it back to Spurs, do you have any, most memorable Spurs games and most memorable Spurs goals? I assume Dele Alli against Crystal Palace 2016
well,
is
you
up
took
there.
the words out of my mouth there. I mean, incredible. That's probably the one that people mention to me more than anything, is that Dele Alli goal. I was there with Ray Houghton, and it's one of those moments I can really vividly remember, because obviously Ray, an incredible goal scorer and playmaker, and he knew what was happening long before it went in, and he actually grabbed my arm, which he never normally did. And even as he was juggling the ball, he knew exactly what was going to happen. And if you listen to Ray's commentary, I think it's absolutely spot on. That's one that people always ask me about, funnily enough. I seem to be at a lot of Jermaine Defoe's big moments as well. Like his hat-trick up at Hull, I remember. That brilliant, and not just at Tottenham, Portsmouth as well. He scored a brilliant lob for Pompey once, and his first goal, I was there against, I remember, was it against Chelsea possibly? And then obviously that brilliant goal he got against West Ham at White Hart Lane. I was commentating on that, and those 5 goals against Wigan. So he was on Goals on Sunday a few years ago, and they went through his top 10 goals, and I think I was commentating on 7 of them, which was incredible.
And he wouldn't even give you an interview. I've had a lot of great Tottenham moments, actually. And like I say, at the moment, I just really look forward to visiting. I don't look forward to getting away afterwards.
It's a nightmare.
But I very much look forward to visiting the stadium and seeing Ange Ball.
Yeah. Just quickly then, what best food, and actually more interested in worst food at a ground?
Well, best food is Chelsea.
Yeah.
And what happened there was when Abramovich took over, some of the Chelsea bigwigs went to Manchester City for a home game, and they were like, wow, this is what you give the media. We've got to better it. And they gave the contract to this high-end catering company, and it was transformed overnight. And even when Abramovich obviously left, as he did, that contract was ongoing. So the club was strapped for cash, but the media was still getting these banquets. It's brilliant to go there. Worst, I mean, it's a Premier League requirement to provide hot food to the media these days. It's one when the clubs get promoted, they get a booklet this thick with regulations and requirements, and that is one of them. So it's difficult to pick a worse one in the Premier League because we're kind of treated really well wherever we go. Obviously, when you then do EFL
It changes.
and go down to League Two,
bring your own
if you
sandwich.
expect the same, forget it. But it's so much more real.
Yeah. Listen, Gary, really, really great to talk to you, get your insight, and people can understand what it's like or hear what it's like to be a commentator. Here's to another 2,000 games, and we really appreciate you coming on.